The war between humans and the Valari Empire had finally gone silent, but peace never followed. The stars were still wounded from years of burning battles. Captain Ethan Cole, a brave human soldier, had fought until his ship was torn apart in the middle of space. When he opened his eyes again, he was not in the stars anymore. He was in a cell, a silver room that glowed faintly like ice under moonlight. The air was cold, heavy, and strange. The walls had no edges, no cracks, no doors he could see. Only a faint shimmer showed where a force field separated him from the corridor outside. 2 alien guards stood watch, tall with dark armor that curved like the shells of insects, their faces hidden behind masks that glowed with blue lines. But it wasn't the guards that caught his attention. It was the figure standing behind them. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered faintly as if light lived beneath it. Her eyes were a deep violet, glowing gently against her pale silver hair that moved as if carried by some unseen wind. She looked young, graceful, and powerful all at once. She didn't belong to the battlefield. She looked like something sacred. She was Princess Alienra of the Valari Empire. Daughter of the Valari Queen. To her people, she was divine blood. To humans, she was the living symbol of the enemy. When Alienra looked at him, her face twisted in quiet disgust. "So this is the human soldier they captured?" Her voice was soft, but each word carried sharpness. "Yes, Your Grace," one of the guards said. "He is from the ship that destroyed 3 of our fleets." Her eyes narrowed, filled with something colder than anger. "Keep that creature away from the palace. Humans destroy everything they touch." Ethan didn't respond. He had no energy left for pride or argument. He had been through battles, through loss, through silence, and silence had always kept him alive. Days turned into weeks. His wounds healed slowly, but he remained a prisoner. His cell had no sound except his own breath. Yet sometimes, just sometimes, he felt her presence. Alienra often came to the prison wing. She told herself it was to study him, to understand the enemy better. But truthfully, she was curious. The humans had fought fiercely, brutal, yes, but full of something her people didn't understand. Emotion. Her kind were raised to suppress it. But humans burned with it, lived by it, even died for it. One day, as she stood outside the barrier, Ethan finally spoke. His voice was rough from silence. "You stare a lot." Her head tilted slightly. "You dare speak to me?" He gave a small, tired smile. "You already listen." Her eyes widened. No one had ever spoken to her like that, softly, calmly, without fear. Not even her own generals. She didn't know why she didn't order him punished. Instead, she stayed longer than usual that day, studying his face, his scars, his eyes that still carried something unbroken. When she left, she caught herself wondering what that something was. The next day she came again, and the next. She never admitted to herself why. Through the shimmering wall they spoke, short sentences at first, like 2 children learning a forbidden game. He told her small stories of Earth, of blue oceans and green forests, of rain that smelled like life. She listened quietly, her violet eyes softening a little each time. One evening she asked, "Why did your people start this war?" He looked at her, tired but honest. "We didn't start it. We just wanted to survive." That answer lingered with her long after she left. At night, Alienra sat by her balcony looking out at the stars. She wondered if there was truth in his words. She had been told humans were wild, savage, and greedy. But this man, this prisoner, there was a calm strength in him that didn't match the stories. Maybe, she thought, fear made it easier to hate, and deep down, something strange and fragile began to grow, a spark of understanding between 2 souls who were never meant to meet. But neither of them knew that this fragile connection would soon face the storm of betrayal, fire, and sacrifice, and that the same human she once feared would one day risk everything to save her life. Princess Alienra lived in a palace made of light, but her heart was full of shadows. Every wall shined like a star. Every hallway was guarded by beauty and power, but she felt none of it. Her crown was not freedom. It was a cage made of gold and duty. The war had taken her brother, Prince Rayan, years ago. He had been kind, gentle, and brave. He believed in peace with the humans. He wanted to show the galaxy that compassion was stronger than fear, but his ship was destroyed during the first battle. And since then, Alienra's heart had been carved by grief and filled with hate. She blamed humans for every pain. every tear, every empty night. Yet the more she saw Ethan, the human prisoner, the more something began to shift inside her. The walls she had built from hate began to crack. One day she stood outside his cell again. The human sat quietly in the corner, carving something into the ground with a small piece of metal. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. He looked up surprised. "Drawing." "Drawing? For what?" "To remember," he said. She stepped closer. "Remember what?" He smiled faintly. "Home." That word hit her harder than she expected. Home. The sound of it carried warmth she had almost forgotten. She looked at his small drawing. It was a shape of a tree, something she had only seen in archives. "Is that real?" she asked. "Was real," Ethan said. Before the war, she fell silent, staring at the drawing for a long time. Then she said quietly, "Open the barrier." The guards hesitated. "Your Grace, do it," she commanded. The energy wall shimmered and vanished. Ethan stood slowly, weak from confinement. The guards tensed, ready to strike if he made a wrong move. "Why are you letting me out?" he asked, cautious. "I want to see," she said, "if humans can do more than destroy." For the first time, she ordered him to work in the palace gardens. It was a strange place for a prisoner, but she wanted to test him, to see who he truly was. The gardens were filled with glowing plants and crystal flowers, floating streams of blue water that hummed with energy. The beauty of the Villari world seemed almost unnatural. But Ethan didn't seem amazed, he only seemed sad. "These plants," he said quietly, "they're beautiful, but they don't smell like anything." "They are perfect," she replied proudly. "Maybe," he said, "but life isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to be real." His words lingered in her heart like a whisper. She didn't know why. Days passed. He repaired broken machines, helped clean the garden, and never complained. Even when he cut his hand or got burned by a spark of energy, he stayed quiet. His patience confused her. One evening, as the sun of her world dipped below the horizon, an energy surge hit the palace. Alarms screamed. A burst of unstable current shot from a power crystal near the garden, exploding in bright white light. Alyenra froze, too shocked to move. Before she could react, Ethan ran toward her and pulled her down to the ground. The energy wave struck near them, shattering the crystal. A sharp pain tore across Ethan's arm, burning his skin. He groaned, but his body shielded her completely. When the light faded, Alyenra opened her eyes. She saw him, breathing heavily, his arm blackened by burns, but still protecting her. You saved me," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "Guess not all humans destroy everything they touch." Her heart stopped for a moment. No one had ever risked their life for her, not even her guards. She ordered the medics to take him to the treatment chamber immediately. The guards looked at her in disbelief, but they obeyed. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat alone by the window, the stars cold and silent around her planet. She thought about the human's words, his pain, his courage. Her chest ached in a way she didn't understand. The next morning, she went to the medical hall. He was lying on the bed, half awake, his arm wrapped in silver bandages. When he saw her, he smiled. "You look better," she said softly. He chuckled weakly. "You look worried," she frowned. "You risked your life for me, why?" He looked at her for a long moment and said simply, "Because you're alive." "Isn't that reason enough?" She didn't know what to say. The words melted something inside her, something heavy she had carried for years. For the first time, Princess Alyenra didn't see him as a human enemy. She saw him as a soul, broken, scarred, and yet beautiful in his quiet strength, and deep within her heart a new feeling began to bloom. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Something her kind had long forgotten. Trust. Peace never lasts long in a palace built on pride. For days after the accident, the story of how a human saved the Villari princess spread through the corridors like wildfire. Servants whispered it in secret. Soldiers muttered it with disgust. The nobles spoke of it with venom. He touched the royal blood. He dared to save her. Humans don't save, they manipulate. The words reached the throne hall faster than light. Queen Sareth, Alyenra's mother, was a woman of cold wisdom and iron control. Her presence filled every room like a storm that never ended. When she heard what happened, her expression didn't change, but her silence was louder than anger. That night, the queen summoned her daughter. Alyenra stood before her throne, nervous but proud. "I hear the human saved your life," the queen said softly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp as blades. "Yes, mother." "He did." "And you allowed him to walk freely in the palace?" "I did. He earned my trust." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Trust? Do you trust the hand that once held a weapon against your people?" Alyenra's chest tightened. "He risked himself for me. He could have let me die, but he didn't." The queen rose slowly from her throne. "My daughter," she said, "humans are clever. They show kindness only to gain power. Never forget, our peace was destroyed because your uncle trusted one." Her words were heavy, cutting through the air like glass. Alyenra wanted to speak, but fear kept her quiet. That night, when she walked back to her chambers, she felt the coldness of the palace more than ever. Every guard she passed looked at her differently, some with pity, some with judgment. She realized that the human had become a danger, not just to himself but to her reputation, her position, and perhaps her life. And yet, when she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the calm eyes, the quiet strength. The burnt arm that had shielded her. She couldn't hate him. Not anymore. The next morning, Alyenra went to the prison wing again. She wanted to see Ethan to make sure he was still safe. But what she found made her heart sink. 2 guards stood outside his cell, both looking uneasy. Inside, Ethan was sitting against the wall again, his hands bruised, his lip bleeding slightly. "What happened?" she demanded. One of the guards hesitated. He refused to answer the queen's question, so he was reminded of his place. Her anger flashed brighter than the sun. "Reminded?" she shouted. "He saved my life." The guards looked down but said nothing. Her voice shook as she ordered, "Leave us." When they were gone, she knelt beside the shimmering wall, her hands pressed against the cold surface. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm sorry." He looked up slowly, his eyes tired but gentle. "Don't be," he said. "You're not free either." The words struck deep. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, 2 souls trapped in different cages. "Why don't you fight back?" she asked softly. "Why stay silent?" He smiled faintly. "Because if I fight, I become what they say I am. I'd rather lose quietly than win by becoming a monster." She lowered her head, tears filling her eyes. "You're not a monster," he chuckled weakly. "You're the first Vallari to ever say that." That night, Alyenra couldn't sleep again. She kept replaying his words. "You're not free either." And he was right. Every move she made, every word she spoke was watched, measured, and judged. Her life was not her own. It belonged to her title, to her crown, to her mother's shadow. And somewhere in that long, sleepless night, a quiet promise formed inside her. If she couldn't free herself, maybe she could free him. Days passed, and tension grew inside the palace. The queen ordered new security measures. The human was to be transferred to a high-security facility on the dark side of the planet. No one would see him again. When Alyenra heard this, her heart broke. She ran through the silver halls, her steps echoing like thunder. She reached the queen's chamber, breathless. "Mother, please, don't send him away." The queen turned slowly. "You will forget that human, Alyenra. This is not a request." Tears burned her eyes. "You're wrong about him, and you are blinded by emotion." Her mother snapped. "He is a human. Their kind cannot be trusted. You are a princess. You will learn to protect your heart from such weakness." Alyenra stood frozen. Her heart screamed, but her voice failed. She bowed her head silently and left, but deep down she knew she would not obey. That night the wind outside howled across the crystal towers. The stars were hidden behind storm clouds. Alyenra stood by her window staring at the sky and whispered, "If they take you away, I'll find you." Far below in the dark prison cell, Ethan sat quietly looking at the faint mark she had left on the wall, the small symbol of a tree he once drew for her, and in that silence both of them knew. Something was coming, something that would test not just courage, but the fragile bond that had begun between human and alien heart. The palace stood silent that night, but beneath its calm beauty, danger was growing like fire under glass. The air was heavy. The guards were restless. Even the stars outside looked uneasy. Princess Alyenra sat on her balcony, staring at the horizon. Her thoughts refused to rest. She could still hear her mother's words echoing inside her head. You are blinded by emotion. Maybe she was. But wasn't emotion what made life real? Ethan had shown her that. Far below her tower in the lower chambers, Ethan sat in his cell again. The bruises had faded, but the pain stayed. Still, when he closed his eyes, he saw the princess's face, the only person who had treated him like something more than a weapon. And then, without warning, the night exploded. A loud boom shook the ground. The walls trembled. Sirens began to scream. The lights flickered red. Alyenra jumped to her feet, her heart racing. Outside her window, she saw fire rising from the east wing of the palace. A group of Vallari rebels had attacked, warriors who hated the queen's rule and wanted to cleanse their world of all weakness. To them, mercy was betrayal. To them, peace with humans was sin. They wanted power. And to get it, they were ready to kill anyone, even the royal family. The hallways filled with smoke and panic. Guards shouted orders. Energy blasts echoed through the corridors. Alyenra ran out of her room, her heart pounding. She could hear screams from the lower levels. The rebellion was spreading fast. Then a thought struck her, a single flash that made her freeze in fear. Ethan. He was still locked below, defenseless. The rebels hated humans. If they reached the prison wing, he would be the first to die. Without thinking, she turned and ran. The corridors were chaos. Fire flickered along the walls. Explosions cracked the air. A guard tried to stop her, shouting, "Your Highness, you must go to the escape chamber." But she pushed past him. "No! Someone's down there." She ran through the smoke-filled tunnels, coughing as heat and ash surrounded her. When she reached the prison level, she saw 2 rebel soldiers forcing the gates open. The sight filled her with fury. She lifted her hand and light burst from her palm. A wave of glowing energy that threw them back. For the first time, her power was not for defense, but for protection. She rushed to Ethan's cell where he was struggling to break free with a broken pipe. The energy wall still hummed between them. His face was covered with dust and blood. When he saw her, his eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" "Saving you," she said breathlessly. He shook his head. "You shouldn't be here." "It's not safe," she smiled faintly. "Neither is leaving you behind." Her hand glowed again and the barrier flickered, then vanished. Ethan stumbled forward, free at last. They didn't waste time. The sounds of gunfire echoed closer. The rebels were coming fast. "Follow me," she shouted. They ran through the twisting halls, stepping over fallen guards, dodging explosions. The floor shook beneath their feet. The air smelled of smoke and burning metal. They reached the engine control hall, the heart of the palace. If they could open the outer gates, they could escape through the docks. But the control system was damaged. Energy readings flickered wildly. Ethan quickly scanned the console. "The main reactor's unstable," he said. "If this blows, the whole palace goes with it." Her eyes widened. "Can you stop it?" "Maybe," he said. "But I'll need time." She looked at him, fear and trust mixing in her eyes. "Then I'll buy you time." She turned toward the entrance as rebel soldiers stormed in. Energy fire filled the room. Alyenra raised her hands, creating a glowing shield that rippled with light. She could feel the heat, the pain, but she didn't stop. Behind her, Ethan worked furiously. Sparks burst from the console as he tried to reroute power. Sweat dripped down his face. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from something deeper. He wasn't fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for her. "Almost done," he shouted. Alyenra's strength began to fade. Her shield flickered. One of the rebels broke through and fired. The blast struck near her shoulder, sending her crashing to the floor. Ethan turned and ran to her, grabbing her hand. "Stay with me." She looked up weakly, her eyes full of pain and light. "You shouldn't have come for me." He smiled faintly. "Guess we're both bad at following orders." The reactor hummed loudly. The control panel turned green. The gate had opened. Their way out was clear. "Come on," he said, pulling her up. Together they stumbled through the halls as the building shook behind them. Fire chased their steps and alarms wailed like dying stars. They reached the outer dock where a small ship waited. Ethan carried her inside, setting her in the seat. Her body trembled, but her eyes stayed locked on him. "Ethan," she whispered, "why risk your life for me?" He looked at her, his face soft in the glow of the burning palace. "Because when everyone else saw an enemy, you saw a person." And with that he lifted the ship into the sky. The palace below them burned like a dying sun. Neither of them knew what would happen next, but for the first time both felt the same thing. Not fear. Not anger. Hope. The ship shook violently as it flew through the stormy sky. Below them, the once shining palace was burning in bright orange flames. Smoke climbed toward the stars, turning the night dark and heavy. Ethan sat at the controls, his hands shaking slightly, his face covered in soot and sweat. Beside him, Princess Alienra lay against the seat, clutching her injured shoulder. Her skin was pale, her breath weak. "Stay with me," he said softly. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "You shouldn't have come back for me." Ethan gave a tired smile. "Didn't we already talk about this? I'm not very good at leaving people behind." A small laugh escaped her lips, but it quickly turned into a wince of pain. He adjusted the ship's route and scanned the system. A red warning light blinked across the screen. His stomach tightened. The reactor core of the palace was about to collapse. If it went unstable, it would take half the city and everyone in it with it. He tried to send a distress signal to the Queen's defense units, but the signal was blocked. The rebellion had damaged everything. Alienra noticed his silence. "What's wrong?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "The palace reactor, it's going to blow." Her eyes widened in shock. "How long?" "Maybe 20 minutes, he said grimly. "Maybe less." There was only one way to stop it, the emergency override inside the main reactor chamber. But the system had to be operated manually. Whoever went in would never come out. A heavy silence filled the small ship. The sound of the engines was the only thing between them and the truth they didn't want to say. Finally, Alienra spoke, her voice trembling. "We have to go back." Ethan looked at her sharply. "No, you're injured." "You don't understand," she said. "If the reactor explodes, my people will die. Innocents, children, everyone in the capital. We can't just run." Ethan took a deep breath. His mind raced. He knew she was right. But he also knew what had to be done. "I'll go," he said quietly. Her head snapped up. "No!" "You can't." "I can," he interrupted gently. "I'm the only one who can reach the reactor in time. You need to stay here. You need to live." She grabbed his arm weakly, her violet eyes filled with pain. "If you do this, you'll die." He smiled faintly. "I already made peace with that a long time ago." Tears filled her eyes. "Why? Why would you throw your life away for my world? For me?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Because your world deserves another chance. Because you do." The words broke something inside her. She wanted to stop him, but she saw the determination in his eyes, the same quiet courage that had always set him apart. He stood and walked toward the hatch. "Lock the ship. Don't open it until I'm gone." She tried to move, but pain held her down. "Ethan, please." He turned back one last time, his face lit by the soft glow of the flames outside. "You once told me humans destroy everything they touch. Maybe this time I'll destroy something worth destroying." Before she could speak again, he was gone. The palace was collapsing when Ethan reached it. The air was thick with smoke and heat. He ran through the ruins, his boots slipping on the glassy floors. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The noise was deafening. He reached the reactor chamber, its light burning bright blue. The energy pulses made his body tremble. His eyes watered from the heat. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. He moved fast, pulling levers, reconnecting circuits, typing commands with shaking fingers. The computer's voice warned him again and again. Critical overload. 5 minutes remaining. He ignored it. He had no time for fear. His heart pounded, but his hands stayed steady. Finally, the system beeped green. The energy flow began to stabilize, but the radiation alarms screamed. His body grew weaker. His vision blurred. Through the haze, he saw the world brightening, the reactor's heart glowing like a rising sun. He smiled faintly. "There you go, Princess." Then everything went white. From the sky above, Alienra saw it, the palace shining for one last time, then falling into silence. The explosion never came. The city was safe, but Ethan was gone. Her heart shattered in the quiet that followed. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered to the empty sky, "You saved my world, at the cost of your own life." For the first time in her life, she bowed her head, not as a princess, but as a soul mourning the man who had taught her what humanity truly meant. And in that silence, she made a vow. She would never let his sacrifice fade into forgotten history. Because Ethan Cole was not just a human soldier, he was proof that even in the darkest war, A single human heart could change the fate of an entire world. The dawn came slowly over the ruins of the royal city. The sky, once filled with smoke, now shimmered with a faint golden glow. The fires had stopped, the wind had quieted, and for the first time in many years, silence ruled the capital. Princess Alyenra stood at the balcony of the palace's highest tower, her silver gown torn and her hair unbound. The city below her was scarred but alive. The people had survived. The reactor hadn't exploded, but the man who saved them was gone. Her fingers trembled as she held a small metal tag, the one she had taken from Ethan's uniform before he left. His name was engraved on it, worn by battle and time, Ethan Cole, Terran Expedition Corps. She pressed it against her heart. It felt cold, lifeless, like the space he had left in her soul. The court healers had tried to comfort her. The guards spoke of rebuilding, but she couldn't hear them. All she could see was the image of Ethan walking away into the flames, never once looking back. She had feared him once. The human who came from the stars, the one she thought was dangerous, unpredictable. Now that same human had given his life for her people, for a world that had treated him like an outsider. That thought haunted her. For days she didn't sleep. She spent her nights alone in the ancient Hall of Stars, the same place where Ethan had once told her about Earth. She remembered his soft voice when he spoke of his oceans, his blue skies and the scent of rain. He had missed his home, yet he never complained. He had been a stranger here, and still, he had loved this world enough to die for it. One evening, as the twin moons rose, Alyenra walked to the edge of the gardens, the place where they had first met. The air smelled of burned soil and ash. She knelt on the ground, touching the earth gently. "This is where you stood," she whispered, "where you promised you wouldn't leave me." Her voice broke. "And yet you did." Tears slipped down her cheeks, falling onto the soil. But as they fell, she remembered something else he once said, a memory hidden in his laughter. "Heroes don't live forever, princess. But sometimes, what they do does." Her breath caught. She looked toward the city. The people were already rebuilding. Alien children ran through the broken streets, their laughter faint but real. Soldiers carried food to survivors. Workers repaired homes, and all of it, every act of hope, had started because one human refused to let them die. Slowly, Alyenra rose to her feet. The grief in her heart didn't fade, but something new began to bloom inside her. A quiet strength. That night, she called her council. The elders gathered around her, expecting orders of vengeance or war. But her voice was calm, steady. "No more destruction," she said. "No more walls between our kind and others. Ethan Cole gave his life so that we may live, not just to survive, but to change." Her words spread through the capital like wind through the trees. The people who once saw humans as a threat began to see them as something more. They built a memorial in the center of the city, a statue of a man standing tall, looking toward the stars. At the base, they carved the words she chose herself. "He came as a stranger. He left as our savior." Every morning, Alyenra visited the statue. She spoke softly, as if Ethan could still hear her. She told him about the new schools being built, about the peace talks between planets, about the gardens growing again, and sometimes, in the early dawn, when the light hit the statue's face just right, she could almost imagine him smiling. Years passed, but she never forgot him. She carried his tag always, around her neck, hidden beneath royal silks. In council, when she faced anger or fear, she would touch the tag and remember his words. When others doubted the future, she would remind them, "If one human could save an entire world, then we have no right to lose hope." One evening, as she looked out into the stars, a new ship glided through the sky, a Terran vessel. The humans had returned, this time not as soldiers but as friends. Alyenra smiled through tears. "You see, Ethan?" she whispered. "You built a bridge between our worlds, even in death." She closed her eyes, letting the soft wind brush her face. Somewhere, in that endless sea of stars, she hoped his spirit was watching, proud, peaceful, and free, because the light he left behind still shone across the galaxy, and in her heart, it would never fade. The years passed quietly. The scars of war faded, replaced by gardens, laughter, and peace. The city that once burned now stood as a symbol of unity, Towers of silver and blue reached toward the sky, and the air hummed with new life. Princess Alienra had become Queen Alienra, wise, graceful, and known as the ruler who brought light after the dark. But even as the seasons changed and time softened her face, she never forgot the man who made it all possible, Ethan Cole. Every year, on the anniversary of the day he saved her world, the people gathered in the great plaza. They brought flowers and candles to the statue of the human who had given everything. Children were told stories about him, about the stranger from the stars who taught them what courage truly meant. And every year, Alienra stood in silence before his statue, her heart filled with both pain and pride. But on the 10th anniversary, something different happened. That morning, as the sun rose, the sky shimmered with streaks of silver light. One of her guards rushed to her chambers. "Your Majesty, there's something in orbit, ships bearing Terran insignia." Alienra's breath caught. She stood quickly, her heart pounding. "Humans?" "Yes, Majesty. They're requesting permission to land." Her hands trembled slightly. It had been so long since she had seen a human face, so long since she had heard that familiar tone in a voice. She nodded softly. "Prepare the landing field." When the Terran ships descended, the crowd gathered in awe. The ships were sleek and bright, shining under the twin suns. The humans who stepped out were dressed in white and blue uniforms, symbols of peace, not war. The lead officer approached, holding a data tablet. "Your Majesty," he said, respectfully bowing, "I am Commander Harris of the Terran Exploration Fleet. We came after receiving records of a human soldier named Ethan Cole. We found his transmission." Alienra's throat tightened. "Transmission?" The commander nodded. "It was buried in the reactor logs. His final message was sent seconds before detonation. It took our scientists years to recover it. We thought you should have it." He handed her a small holographic crystal. With shaking hands, Alienra activated it. The air shimmered, and then for the first time in 10 long years, his voice filled the world again. "If anyone finds this, tell them I'm sorry. Tell the princess I made my choice. The world deserves to live. Don't waste it. Build something better. Don't let fear rule you. Tell her she was never wrong to believe there's light in all of us." The voice faded, but its warmth lingered in the air. Alienra's eyes filled with tears. The crowd around her fell silent, many wiping their eyes too. For them it was not just a recording. It was a memory of the man who had become their guardian angel. Alienra pressed her hand to her chest, whispering, "You kept your promise, Ethan. And so did we." That night, she invited the human visitors to a grand ceremony. Together they walked through the gardens where the first bridge between their species had begun, where Ethan had once stood. Under the soft glow of the stars, she spoke to the people. "Once we feared humans. We thought them dangerous. But one human taught us that the heart can cross any distance, even between worlds. He gave his life to protect us. His courage became our guide. His sacrifice, our peace." She turned to the sky. "Today humans and Illyrians stand together, not as strangers, but as family, because one man proved that compassion is stronger than fear." The humans bowed their heads in silence. Then one of them stepped forward, a young woman with the same green eyes Ethan once had. She placed a small capsule on the soil near his statue. Inside it was a seed, one that would grow into a tree only under twin suns. "It's from Earth," the woman said softly. "Ethan's home." Alienra smiled through her tears. "Then it will grow here, in his honor." Years later, that tree stood tall beside the statue. Its silver leaves shimmered like tiny stars, and its roots wrapped gently around the earth that Ethan had saved. Children played beneath its shade. Lovers whispered promises there. And travelers from distant worlds came to see it. The Tree of Two Worlds, as it was called. Queen Alienra often visited it at dawn. She would sit quietly, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves. Sometimes, when the wind passed through the branches, it sounded like a whisper, soft, gentle, familiar. "You did well, Princess," and she would close her eyes and smile. Because even though Ethan Cole was gone, his presence was everywhere, in the laughter of her people, in the peace of her world, and in the light of every new sunrise. For he was not just a soldier, not just a savior. He was the bridge between two hearts, two worlds, and two destinies. And as long as the stars burned above them, his story would never die.